Chapter 13 of Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold, Bennett. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Timothy Ferguson. Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold, Bennett. Chapter 13. An English Library, Period 3. The catalogue of necessary authors in this third and last period being so long, it is convenient to divide the prose writers into imaginative and non-imaginative. In the latter half of the period, the question of copyright affects our scheme to a certain extent, because it affects prices. Fortunately, it is the fact that no single book of recognised first-rate general importance is conspicuously dear. Nevertheless, I have encountered difficulties in the second rank. I have dealt with them in a spirit of compromise. I think I may say that, though I should have included a few more authors had their books been obtainable at a reasonable price, I have omitted none that I consider indispensable to a thoroughly representative collection. No living author is included. Where I do not specify the edition of a book, the original copyright edition is meant. Prose writers. Imaginative. Sir Walter Scott, Waverley, Heart of Midlothian, Quentin Durward, Red Gauntlet, Ivanhoe. Everyman's Library, 5 volumes, 5s. Sir Walter Scott, Marmion, etc., Canterbury Poets, 1s. Charles Lamb, Works in Prose and Verse, Clarendon Press, 2 volumes, 4s. Charles Lamb Letters, Nune's Thin Paper Classics, 2s. Walter Savage Landor, Imaginary Conversations, Scott Library, 1s. Walter Savage Landor, Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1s. Leigh Hunt, Essays and Sketches, World's Classics, 1s. Thomas Love Peacock, Principal Novels, New Universal Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Mary Russell Mitford, Our Village, Scott Library, 1s. Michael Scott, Tom Cringle's Log, Macmillan's Illustrated Novels, 2s. 6d. Frederick Marriott, Mr. Midshipman Easy, Everyman's Library, 1s. John Galt, Annals of the Parish, Everyman's Library, 1s. Susan Ferrier, Marriage, Routledge's Edition, 2s. Douglas Jerrold, Mrs. Caudle's Curtain Lectures, World Classics, 1s. Lord Lytton, Last Days of Pompeii, Everyman's Library, 1s. William Carlton, Stories, Scott Library, 1s. Charles James Lever, Harry Lorrequer, Everyman's Library, 1s. Harrison Ainsworth, The Tower of London, New Universal Library, 1s. George Henry Borrow, Bible in Spain, Lavengro, New Universal Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Lord Beaconsfield, Sybil, Coningsby, Lane's New Pocket Library, 2 volumes, 2s. W. M. Thackeray, Vanity Fair, Esmond, Everyman's Library, 2 volumes, 2s. W. M. Thackeray, Barry Lyndon and Roundabout Papers, etc. Nelson's New Century Library, 2s. Charles Dickens, Works, Everyman's Library, 18 volumes, 18s. Charles Reade, The Cloister and the Hearth, Everyman's Library, 1s. Anthony Trollope, Barchester Towers, Framley Parsonage, Lane's New Pocket Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Charles Kingsley, Westward Ho, Everyman's Library, 1s. Henry Kingsley, Ravenshoe, Everyman's Library, 1s. Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, Shirley, Villette, Professor, and Poems, World's Classics, 4 volumes, 4s. Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights, World's Classics, 1s. Elizabeth Gaskell, Cranford, World's Classics, 1s. Elizabeth Gaskell, Life of Charlotte Bronte, 2s. 6d. George Eliot, Adam Bede, Silas Mariner, The Mill on the Floss, Everyman's Library, 3 volumes, 3 shillings. G. J. White Melville, The Gladiators, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Adam Smith, Dreamthorpe, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. George MacDonald, Malcolm, 1 shilling and sixpence. Walter Pater, Imaginary Portraits, 6 shillings. Wilkie Collins, The Woman in White, 1 shilling. R. D. Blackmore, Lorna Doone, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Samuel Butler, Erewhon, Fifields edition, 2 shillings and sixpence. Lawrence Oliphant, Altiora Petto, 3 shillings and sixpence. Margaret Oliphant, Salem Chapel, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Richard Jefferies, Story of My Heart, 2 shillings. Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, Macmillan's cheap edition, 1 shilling. John Henry Shorthouse, John Inglesant, Macmillan's Pocket Classics, 2 shillings. R. L. Stevenson, Master of Ballantrae, Virginibus Puresque, Pocket Edition, 2 volumes, 4 shillings. George Gissing, The Odd Women, Popular Edition, bound, 7d. Total, £5 and a penny. Names such as Charlotte Yonge and Dinah Craik are omitted intentionally. Prose writers non-imaginative. William Hazlitt, Spirit of the Age, World's Classics, 1 shilling. William Hazlitt, English Poets and Comic Writers, Bond's Library, 3 shillings and sixpence. Francis Jeffrey, Essays from Edinburgh Review, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Thomas de Quincey, Confessions of an English Opium Eater, etc., Scott Library, 1 shilling. Sidney Smith, Selected Papers, Scott Library, 1 shilling. George Finlay, Byzantine Empire, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. John G. Lockhart, Life of Scott, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Agnes Strickland, Life of Queen Elizabeth, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Hugh Miller, Old Red Sandstone, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. J. H. Newman, Apologia Pro Vita Sua, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Lord Macaulay, History of England, 3 volumes. Essays, 2 volumes. Everyman's Library, 5 volumes, 5 shillings. A. P. Stanley, Memorials of Canterbury, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Thomas Carlyle, French Revolution, 2 volumes. Cromwell, 3 volumes. Sartor Resartus and Heroes and Hero Worship, 1 volume. Everyman's Library, 6 volumes, 6 shillings. Thomas Carlyle, Latter-day Pamphlets, Chapman and Hall edition, 1 shilling. Charles Darwin, Origin of the Species, Murray's edition, 1 shilling. Charles Darwin, Voyage of the Beagle, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. A. W. Kinglake, Eothen, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. John Stuart Mill, Auguste Comte and Positivism, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. John Brown, Horae Subsecave, World's Classics, 1 shilling. John Brown, Rab and His Friends, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Sir Arthur Helps, Friends in Council, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Mark Patterson, Life of Milton, English Men of Letters series, 1 shilling. F. W. Robertson, On Religion and Life, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Benjamin Jowett, Interpretation of Scripture, Routledge's London Library, 2 shillings and sixpence. George Henry Lewes, Principles of Success in Literature, Scott Library, 1 shilling. Alexander Bain, Mind and Body, 4 shillings. James Anthony Froude, Dissolution of the Monasteries, etc., New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Mary Wollstonecraft, Vindication of the Rights of Women, Scott Library, 1 shilling. John Tyndall, Glaciers of the Alps, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Sir Henry Maine, Ancient Law, New University Library, 1 shilling. John Ruskin, Seven Lamps, 1 volume. Sesame and Lilies, 1 volume. Stones of Venice, 3 volumes. George Allen's cheap edition, 5 volumes, 5s. Herbert Spencer, First Principles, 2 volumes, 2s. Herbert Spencer, Education, 1s. Sir Richard Burton, Narrative of a Pilgrimage to Mecca, Bond's edition, 2 volumes, 7s. J. S. Speake, Sources of the Nile, Everyman's Library, 1s. Thomas Henry Huxley, Essays, Everyman's Library, 1s. E. A. Freeman, Europe, Macmillan's Primers, 1s. William Stubbs, Early Plantagenets, 2s. Walter Bagehot, Lombard Street, 3s. 6d. Richard Holt Hutton, Cardinal Newman, 3s. 6d. Sir John Seeley, Ecce Homo, New Universal Library, 1s. David Mason, Thomas de Quincey, Englishmen of Letters Series, 1s. John Richard Green, Short History of the English People, 8s. 6d. Sir Leslie Stephen, Pope, Englishmen of Letters Series, 1s. Lord Acton, On the Study of History, 2s. 6d. Mandell Creighton, The Age of Elizabeth, 2s. 6d. F. W. H. Myers, Wordsworth, Englishmen of Letters Series, 1s. Total £4, 10s. 6d. The following authors are omitted, I think, justifiably: Hallam, Whewell, Grote, Faraday, Herschel, Hamilton, John Wilson, Richard Owen, Sterling Maxwell, Buckle, Oscar Wilde, P. G. Hamerton, F. D. Morris, Henry Sidgwick, and Richard Jebb. Lastly, here is the list of poets. In the matter of price per volume, it is the most expensive of all of the lists. This is due to the fact that it contains a larger proportion of copyright works. Where I do not specify the edition of a book, the original copyright edition is meant. Poets. William Wordsworth, Poetical Works, Oxford edition, 3s. 6d. William Wordsworth, Literary Criticism, Nowell Smith's edition, 2s. 6d. Robert Southey, Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1s. Robert Southey, Life of Nelson, Everyman's Library, 1s. S. T. Coleridge, Poetical Works, Nune's Thin Paper Classics, 2s. S. T. Coleridge, Biographia Literaria, Everyman's Library, 1s. S. T. Coleridge, Lectures on Shakespeare, Everyman's Library, 1s. John Keats, Poetical Works, Oxford edition, 3s. 6d. Percy Bysshe Shelley, Poetical Works, Oxford edition, 3s. 6d. Lord Byron, Poems, E. Hartley Coleridge's edition, 6s. Lord Byron, Letters, Scott Library, 1s. Thomas Hood, Poems, World's Classics, 1s. James and Horace Smith, Rejected Addresses, New Universal Library, 1s. John Keble, The Christian Year, Canterbury Poets, 1s. George Darley, Poems, Muses Library, 1s. T. L. Beddoes, Poems, Muses Library, 1s. Thomas Moore, Selected Poems, Canterbury Poets, James Clarence Mangan, Poems, D. J. Donohue's edition, 3s. 6d. W. Mackworth Prayed, Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1s. R. S. Hawker, Cornish Ballads, C. E. Byles' edition, 5s. Edward Fitzgerald, Omar Khayyam, Golden Treasury Series, 2s. 6d. P. J. Bailey, Festus, Routledge's edition, 3s. 6d. Arthur Hugh Clow, Poems, Muses Library, 1s. Lord Tennyson, Poetical Works, Globe edition, 3s. 6d. Robert Browning, Poetical Works, World's Classics, 2 volumes, 2s. Elizabeth Browning, Aurora Leigh, Temple Classics, 1s. 6d. Elizabeth Browning, Shorter Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1s. P. B. Marston, Songtide, Canterbury Poets, 1s. Aubrey de Vere, Legends of St. Patrick, Cassell's National Library, 6d. Matthew Arnold, Poems, Golden Treasury Series, 2s. 6d. Matthew Arnold, Essays, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Coventry Patmore, Poems, Muses Library, 1 shilling. Sydney Dobell, Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1 shilling. Eric Mackay, Love Letters of a Violinist, Canterbury Poets, 1 shilling. T. E. Brown, Poems, 7 shillings and sixpence. C. S. Calverley, Verses and Translations, 1 shilling and sixpence. D. G. Rossetti, Poetical Works, 3 shillings and sixpence. Christina Rossetti, Selected Poems, Golden Treasury Series, 2 shillings and sixpence. James Thomson, City of Dreadful Night, 3 shillings and sixpence. Jean Ingelow, Poems, Red Letter Library, 1 shilling and sixpence. William Morris, The Earthly Paradise, 6 shillings. William Morris, Early Romances, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Augusta Webster, Selected Poems, 4 shillings and sixpence. W. E. Henley, Poetical Works, 6 shillings. Francis Thompson, Selected Poems, 5 shillings. Total, £5, 7 shillings. Poets who I have omitted after hesitation are Ebenezer Elliott, Thomas Woolner, William Barnes, Gerald Massey, and Charles Jeremiah Wells. On the other hand, I have no hesitation about omitting David Moore, Felicia Hemans, Ayton, Sir Edward Arnold, and Sir Lewis Morris. I have included John Keble in deference to much enlightened opinion, but against my own inclination. There are 2 names in the list which may be somewhat unfamiliar to many readers. James Clarence Mangan is the author of My Dark Rosaline, an acknowledged masterpiece which every library must contain. T. E. Brown is a great poet, recognised as such by a few hundred people, and is assuredly destined to a far wider fame. I have included Fitzgerald because Omar Khayyam is much less a translation than an original work. Summary of the 19th century. 83 prose writers in 141 volumes, costing £9, 10 shillings and 7 pence. 38 poets in 46 volumes, costing £5, 7 shillings. Total 121 writers in 187 volumes, costing £14, 17 shillings and 7 pence. Grand summary of complete library. 1 to Dryden, 48 authors, 72 volumes, £5, 9 shillings. 2, 18th century, 57 authors, 78 volumes, £6, 8 shillings. 3, 19th century, 121 authors, 187 volumes, £14, 17 shillings and 7 pence. Total, 226 authors, 337 volumes, £26, 14 shillings and 7 pence. I think it will be agreed that the total cost of this library is surprisingly small. By laying out the sum of 6d. a day for 3 years, you may become the possessor of a collection of books which, for range and completeness in all branches of literature, will bear comparison with libraries far more imposing, more numerous, and more expensive. I have mentioned the question of discount. The discount which you will obtain, even from a bookseller in a small town, will be sufficient to pay for Chambers' Cyclopaedia of English Literature, 3 volumes, price 30 shillings net. This work is indispensable to a bookman. Personally, I owe it much. When you have read, wholly or in part, a majority of these 335 volumes, with enjoyment, you may begin to whisper to yourself that your literary taste is formed, and you may pronounce judgment on modern works which come before the bar of your opinion, in the calm assurance that, though to err is human, you do, at any rate, know what you are talking about. End of chapter 13. Recording by Timothy Ferguson, Gold Coast, Australia.